Hello, this is Franco Cabral broadcasting from the Honest Liar Podcast, a conversation around finding the inner liar within all of us and leveraging the truth to create expansion across all areas of your life. Today's topic is Creation Requires Space. This week, I went to a float session, which is one of my favorite things to do when I go on a date for myself. And dating myself is a process that I started about 2 years ago, along with finding the warrior's way and working on developing myself personally to become the best version of myself. I learned early on that the importance was of putting myself first. And I started the concept of doing a date once a week for myself, where I did something that I typically wouldn't do in the past that I knew that I enjoyed doing. Sometimes it's a massage. Recently, it's been floating. It's something that has brought me a lot of power when I go on these sessions. And ultimately, I go into a place, here locally in town where I love the place. It's clean. It's a great environment. And I go into a room where there's a large bathtub-like setup in a dark enclosed space. It's not enclosed, actually. It's open. I happen to be a little bit claustrophobic. So, we're going into one of those closed pods. It definitely wouldn't serve me to create space in my mind. But I lay there in a bathtub full of water and sodium. I think it's about 2,000 pounds of sodium. And you float. The sodium lifts you up and you are buoyant and you are basically in a space where your gravity is not impacting your body, and you can come to a very deep, relaxing, meditative state. There's a tremendous value for my body from a recovery standpoint, the salt. But the biggest benefit that I get from it is in my mind. And I have an hour where I'm just creating space in my mind to think, process, and just without distraction, be with myself. Now, this is something that I absolutely needed this week because my mind was a shit show. And the reason was it really started on Sunday night, and I've communicated this on some of my social media channels, that I found out that I have a fight scheduled. And I talked about the fear of boxing and the fear, insecurities and doubts that have come up for me on this process of becoming a fighter in the last podcast, or actually 2 podcasts ago. But it finally became really real in my mind when I got the fight scheduled. A massive amount of fear, doubt, insecurity, doubting whether I'm good enough. And I was just really in a fucked up place mentally this week as I found out that news, and I wanted to cancel it. All sorts of stories came up for me. So when I was meditating in the float session, first of all, I was extremely grateful for the habit that I have created with dating myself, because I had actually created this session or scheduled this session for this float before I had gotten the news about my boxing match. But this became the perfect time for me to really start to figure out how I was going to tackle my fear and insecurity that I was feeling about this fight. And as I was going through, the process of thinking about the fear and what was really going on for me in my mind, I started to uncover many different things as to why I was feeling so much doubt. The biggest for me was that I have had a story that's operated my whole life that I'm not a fighter. And the whole reason I was going into boxing was because I wanted to become the man that was capable of getting in the ring and doing this fight. Now, I've already accomplished that because I have had the courage to train as much as I have. I committed to doing a fight, and I will step in the ring as that guy. But as the previous story was coming up for me, I couldn't win in the ring if I have the story that's operating that I'm not a fighter. So I'm not saying that I've overcome this story, but I identified when I was in this float session that what I need to tackle is the story that previously has operated my mind, which is that I'm not a fighter because I want to win. And for me to win, I have to fundamentally change the story that I am a fighter, because a fighter can win. So I'm in the process still of figuring that out and how I'm going to do that. But the gift and what I really want to talk about on this podcast is what happens when we create space. And that's really for anything that we want to accomplish in our lives, anything we desire, whether it's more connection with our loved ones. I want to have a more profitable business. I want to be better in my body. I want to be more connected with myself. Everything you want to do for you requires space. So often we get caught up in the rat race and the doing, for instance, in relationships. I've talked about how, 2 years ago, my wife and I were in a space where we were doing, and we were really more operating as teammates because we were so caught up in the day-to-day of, raising children. This one has to go here, got to make sure this is done, work, come home, laundry, dinner, preparing for the next day. What does Sienna need for school? Adrian. And it becomes such a routine and a habit, and we just get caught up in the doing that sometimes if you don't create space, we lose sight of the connection. And we started implementing 2 years ago date nights. And those date nights, what I'm realizing now is all it really is space. It's space to create connection. And then I started thinking about this concept of space. Any area of my life that I've been successful and I've been able to accomplish something that I said I desired, it required space to actually be able to create that. So in my body, my target that I'm going after this year is, becoming a boxer. And now it's winning a fight. That has required a tremendous amount of space without distraction for me to be able to really hone in on improving and learning the craft of boxing. I also want to create a relationship with my wife, and I wanted to create a relationship with my wife that's on fire. That has required an immense amount of space to connect weekly, consistently. Also, the space to do my daily deposits and to let her know that I love, appreciate, and honor her. And also, most recently, we went on a trip to Hawaii for 8 days. No kids, no distraction, of just space to create connection. That same concept translates to my business. We get caught up so often as entrepreneurs of working in the business that it's required to remove yourself sometimes or often outside of the business to think and in a more strategic, high-level view and work on the business versus in the business. That requires space. Connecting with myself and developing a spiritual connection, it requires space. And I started to really understand this concept of space from a date's perspective. Any relationship that I want to improve on in my world or anything I want to be better at, I have to intentionally create the space for that to be nurtured and for the creation to happen that I'm looking for. So, with that said, there's many areas I'm sure in your life as there are with my life. Like right now, I'm dealing with a lot of fear and anxiety and stress that's coming up with, boxing for me. I'm 22 days away at this moment when I'm recording this from when my fight is. I'm not going to overcome those fears if I don't allow myself space to create the new story. And I'm tackling this from different angles right now. I've communicated to my family and my support system, and everybody's on board with supporting me for this. There's a physical aspect, obviously, for boxing, which means I have to be committed to my routines and my training because there's some tactical actions that will help me overcome some of the fear. But also, I have to honor the feelings that I'm feeling around the stories and the fear and the anxiety. If I pretend that, I'm not really feeling what I'm feeling, or I try to ignore or avoid those feelings are still going to percolate, and I'm not actually creating the space to deal with those emotions and those feelings that are coming up. So the message is fairly simple. I think by now, hopefully you've gotten it, is space is required for any creation that you desire in your life. So my ask for you from this podcast is to think to yourself, what area of your life currently do you know needs the most attention? Is it your body? Is it your being, your connection spiritually? Is it a relationship that's, really, in need right now? Or is it your business? And I would have you think, how can you create space? And from this podcast, take the action item that you're going to put some time on your calendar immediately. Don't wait for thinking time or creating time or space, whatever you want to call it. I mentioned thinking time from a business perspective. I'm currently reading a book called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham, which is very powerful. And he talks about thinking time within your business and how important it is, because all of the most successful people, they think and strategically execute on some of the tactical, but based on creating the space to think at a higher level. So my ask for you is, no matter whether it's business or whatever area of your life, is to create the space to think at a higher level and take a look and remove yourself from just the daily activity that you're in to create what it is that you desire. So thank you for your time, and I hope this message connects with you. If it does, and this has provided you value, please share this podcast with somebody else that you think would connect with it. As always, I ask if you can rate and review the show, please. It helps with spreading the light, which is the message, obviously, and the mission that I'm on. Thank you so much, and I look forward to connecting with you on the next podcast.